Hey guys, I'm Drago and that is the alarm for my antibiotic. What great timing. Garten of BanBan. Just those three words can conjure up such a sort of negative reaction. I think a lot of people can agree that it's not the best game series out there, especially not in terms of mascot horror. I personally am one of those people that don't like it that much, but there are people that absolutely love it. And you know what? That's completely fair. You love what you want to love. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. But it is my opinion that the designs are absolute dog shit. What are those? They are flat, they are boring. A lot of them just look like blobs stuck together. I mean, sure, sometimes plain and simple designs can work really well, and that is especially true in things that are made for children. Bold and simple works well for things designed towards children. But when it comes to trying to make a horror game, you need to find a balance of making that design for kids, but also having that uncanny feel. And that's the point of mascot horror, is that this thing made for children is somehow still creepy. And the fact that it's made for children and yet has this horrible side is what makes it uncanny and creepy. And for me, BanBan just doesn't do that. So I thought it might be fun to try give the designs my own flair, make my own spin on them, basically redesign them in my vision. This is all completely for fun. I'm not saying the devs should redesign their characters. What they want to do is totally up to them. This is just literally all for a bit of fun. I know there is sort of a lot of controversy surrounding Garten of BanBan. I'm in no position to sit here and educate on it. I wouldn't say I'm entirely out the loop, but it doesn't involve me. I don't know everything about it, and so I'm not going to sit here and potentially give misinformation by accident. I don't want to make assumptions and I don't want to make false claims. So if you want to learn more about what's happened, I will leave a video in the description. But with that being said, I'm not going to touch on the drama, I'm not going to touch on controversy. We are literally here to have fun. Also, before we start, I am actually quite ill at the moment, so sorry if I sound a bit off in this video. I'm trying my best. I just wanted to get this done and out for you guys, otherwise it would be way too long without a video. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy anyway. So it's not a Garten of BanBan video without starting with BanBan himself. Now, from what I know, and that's basically just from having edited videos for the Ghost Reaper, BanBan is the principal of the kindergarten. And so for his, I guess, normal form, I went for a very friendly demeanour. I wanted a pose that shouts, "Hey kids, I'm your friendly school principal." I didn't want him to look too strict, I just wanted him to look really bubbly and friendly. And so in my construction, I went for a pose that is him waving. I also put one foot up to sort of indicate this idea of him almost leaning backwards with this jovial pose, a lot of energy to him. With the construction done, I laid out the general shape of his body. Now in-game, BanBan is not very well defined. He has pretty much no neck, you can barely see the difference between his thighs and calves. His arms are quite just sort of sausagey. So I really wanted to make sure to define his body a bit more, especially around his head. There are two things about him that I did keep. That was the party hats, of course. That's a big part of his design. The other was those bulbous forearms. I don't know what they are or what they're about, but when you're doing character design, you do need to think about the silhouette. And those sort of weird forearms give the silhouette BanBan. You see that and you think, oh yeah, BanBan. So I definitely want to keep those as well. I did change things though as well. While I kept his eyes the same, I did make it so his mouth is animated, that it can move, he can use it to emote, he can talk with actual lip sync. I also added in a tie to give that sort of formal principal look, and I gave him shoes because I also thought it fit the more formal principal look as well. These sort of clothes actually help BanBan feel a lot more human, and if I remember correctly, he is sort of the most human in the game. I think he even remembers his previous name before he became what he is. I don't know much about the lore, do forgive me. But yeah, I really felt like it was important to keep those human features on BanBan. When I went into the lines, I chose quite a thick line style. This really does sort of give the bold, crisp look that is good for a children's cartoon. I basically thought of this as, what if this was a TV series for children? A cartoon set in a school where BanBan is the head teacher, and this is how he looks. kept pretty much his original colours, to be fair. I don't feel like they needed much changing. I may have slightly desaturated them, but not much. The only change on the colour was, of course, the tie, which I made green because I felt it complemented the red quite well, and just sort of brown leather shoes. I wanted to keep it a fairly simple shading style on this one, so I just used my watercolour brush to basically add in basic shadows and highlights, just give them a bit more form and shape. With original BanBan done, it was time for the demon BanBan. Now, I don't like being this harsh, but I really do hate the demon BanBan design. It's so boring, and it's like, that's not scary whatsoever. I'm sorry, but it's not. And it's like they went for this weird, almost muscular buff look, but they also defined his ribs, and it just doesn't work like that. And the horns are just so pathetic, and his face is just weird, and So I went a very different direction with this. I wanted a sort of hunched over pose. I don't know, I feel like BanBan would probably be in a bit of pain in this demon form, so having that sort of hunched over look really shows that pain that he might be in. I also made it so he's kind of sat on one hand on the floor to balance himself. Gives this idea of a more distorted body look because it's like he can't balance himself properly, he can't stand up properly because his body and bones have distorted so much. Now, in the more refined sketch, I started with his head, and while I wanted to keep the general head shape of BanBan, I actually went in and I defined his cheekbones a lot more. This kind of gave it a bit more of a skull look. And then from there, I sort of took the idea of this wide open mouth from the original design, and I just exaggerated it. I basically made it so that it's like if you took his jaw and you dragged it down to the point of it ripping and tearing. I just wanted to make him look really unhealthy, basically. I also decided to add in a classic tongue here. As for the teeth, I went small, thin, and crooked. It almost looked a bit like a sort of deep sea fish mouth, which is definitely an unsettling, uncanny vibe. Now, one complaint I have in the game is that we never really see BanBan transform. There's no sort of idea of him transforming, it's literally like a blink of an eye. And there's no sort of indication of that transformation even happening. So I decided to try and make that a bit more clear. And one of the ways I did that is had it so that the party hats are still on the horns. I had it so the base of the party hats are stuck to the base of the horns, but the horns have burst through and the tips of the party hat are kind of resting in the tips of the horns. I also made the horns a lot more fancy, basically. Really just gave more of a demon feel to have these bigger, twisted horns. As for his body, I decided to stay away from the buff look of BanBan. I went more for a lot more of an emancipated bony look. And I like this because I feel like having those sort of ribs and the spine and all those sort of bones sticking out and being visible in a way that it really shouldn't be just helps add to this horror vibe of it. Almost a little bit Wendigo-esque, you know. And I think that works because it's almost like Demon BanBan wants to eat you. I mean, he's always going on about pancreas and stuff. So the idea of it being a bit Wendigo-like does work. The only part that I made not so skinny was his forearms. Because once again, if you put this as a silhouette, you'd see those forearms, you'd see the party hats, and you'd think, BanBan, that is BanBan. Just those distinctive parts of his character design. To keep with the transformation theme, I made it look like that the claws on his hands have burst out from his fingers, so that the skin is frayed. And I kept his shoes, but I made it so they have also been burst open as his feet have grown and elongated. Now with the lines, I decided to go for a very different direction. With the horror feel, it needs to look a lot more realistic. We are not going for cartoony here, so a much thinner line art fit this way better. I did make sure to add a lot of detail in the line art, basically add in crevices and sags and folds in the skin, add in lines to show parts that would be stretched, and just really make sure to define areas. As for his colours, I basically took the original BanBan colours and made them way more desaturated. I wanted to get this sort of very pale skin vibe, almost like the skin has stretched out so much that it has turned pale. The things that remain the same colours are the party hat, the shoes and the tie. Once I have all the flat colour, I use my watercolour brush to add some sort of texture and shading again. This time I did put it on a texture that was Berber and blots. Now this colour actually reminded me of William Afton's corpse within Springtrap, and I think that's why I chose this sort of rough texture, because it almost gives the flesh this dried look, and I guess making him look a little bit mummified in this form is actually quite uncanny, so I think that worked quite well. So I basically just added in shadows and later on the same for highlights to the general shape of his body, really accentuating areas like folds and sags and stretch marks and things like that. One thing I decided to do was make his eyes look quite bulbous. I had made them small and pupils pointed in different directions. This was because I almost wanted to make it feel like the eyes were bulging out of his skull, and so I gave them this little bit of a bloodshot look as well, just to really help exaggerate that. The final touches were just adding some shading layers, basically using shade and shine and overlays to add in some extra shadows and highlights, just to really define areas and make them pop a bit more, and I added a bit of jewel just to really finish it off. Alright, that's it. That's BanBan redesigned. That's literally all. I said I'd redesign Garten of BanBan, and I did. There's BanBan. What, you want more? You actually want more? Really? You want more? Okay, we'll do the gorilla. Jumbo Josh. This big fella is such an ugly design. Just the way he stands is so weird. That anatomy just doesn't really work. And once again, he's just blobs on top of blobs on top of blobs. So I decided to go a very, very different direction for him, and I just took a gorilla and I made him a gorilla, because I think that's what they were going for. He's got that sort of stance to him, he's big, so I turned him into a gorilla. Jumbo Josh gives me jock vibes. If we were going back to the cartoon that I said about earlier, where it's the school and BanBan is the head teacher, I see Josh as the sort of school jock, the sporty person who's not quite all there in the head. A little bit on the dopey side, I guess. You know, in children's cartoons you get that one character that needs to be taught a lot, and that's how they teach the lessons to the kids, by teaching this character. And I think Josh should be the character that needs to be taught all the lessons and the morals. So he's a little bit head empty, no thoughts, but he's strong, he likes sports, he, you know, very much brawn rather than brain. And that's the vibe I went with for him. He's this big, friendly, huggable guy. He just vibes, basically. He's good with the kids. He may not be all there in the head, but who really cares? He's a good guy. That sort of thing. To stick with the sort of jock feeling I got, I actually gave him that sort of high school jacket thing, that sort of sports team look. And I added the little BanBan emblem to it to show, you know, Garten of BanBan. Just like with normal BanBan, I went for thick, cartoony lines. Bold and simple is how I see this. I really want to make these feel like they are made to appeal to children. They are cartoons, they are friendly, they are characters that are there to make the children happy. And I really hope the styles I went for do show that. Now Josh had so much more colouring to do on him than the original, so I took his sort of original shade of green to use for his furry parts. That sounds really weird. And then I sort of changed those shades to make different areas. So he now has parts that are just bare skin, like a gorilla. And I made those a lighter tone. His jacket, I went for sort of a creamy white with purple accents. I chose purple because it's something that actually goes with green quite a lot in media, and I think it works quite well together. Once again, I used my watercolour brush for some simple shading, just defining areas and shapes, and basically just making areas look more visible while not overcomplicating the shading. The only difference on what I did for BanBan versus Josh is I used watercolour brush to make a sort of idea of hair. Basically by just making shadowed lines and then following those lines with highlights, and it just gives this idea of there's a clump of fur there, you know. Just to add a little bit of texture and really make it seem like, yeah, he's a gorilla, he's hairy. Now, Jumbo Josh doesn't have a demon form. BanBan is really the only one with a demon form. But I almost decided I wanted to go this direction with the game where you had these cartoony caricatures that would be seen, say, on the walls like you do in game, versus the actual physical character in the game that's chasing you down. It's almost like this idea of what they were meant to be and how they actually turned out. Expectation versus reality, basically. So Jumbo Josh, I made him obviously huge, and I went a more sort of animalistic, angry gorilla pose. I wanted this guy to look so grumpy. He gives me grumpy vibes. All he wants to do is smash. And I guess that's actually sort of a good way to describe how I was imagining him, is just a bit like the Hulk. Big green guy who wants to smash things and has no other thoughts than smash. Oh no, wait, that sounds so wrong. Oh no. Anyways, I went with pretty much the same head shape, but a lot bulkier and a lot more of a sort of angry look. Basically just having the brow a bit more furrowed and having the nostrils look more flared. I also made the hair on top of his head a bit messier. His general body shape is pretty much the same though, just, scaled up a lot more, and I had it so his shoulders were a lot more hunched. It basically gives a lot more of a hostile feeling. I then went in and added the jacket, and I thought this guy probably turned out way bigger than he was supposed to. And so the people who made him made a jacket for him, but that jacket ended up being way too small. And so Jumbo Josh tries to wear this jacket, but it clings to him really tightly, and it's basically splitting and tearing where it just does not fit him. Once again, I kept the lines thin for that more realistic look. This time I had fur to work with, so I did a lot to really show off that texture. So I basically added more lines around the tufts of fur just to show off that texture. I went the same route with the colouring, basically the same palette but a lot more desaturated. And for Josh, almost darker as well. I just felt like this fit him quite well, it just sort of naturally took that direction. For his eyes, I kept them very empty looking. And for his teeth and nails, I wanted to go this sort of very dirty yellow looking colour. I then went into just doing some basic texturing and shading with the watercolour brush. This time, however, I put it on a stringy texture. I believe I used flat bristle for this one. This basically gives the illusion of fur. You can use darker tones and then lighter tones on top and just blend it all in, and you get this nice look of different strands of fur basically. Once I'd done that though, I went in and really refined some areas. Like around the knuckles, I really wanted to feel like those knuckles were pointy and his hands were tense, so I really exaggerated the shadows around the edges of the knuckles. One of the final things I did was a few shading layers. Once again on shade and shine and overlay, just to really define areas. Some of it was blending in a bit too much to each other, so I just wanted to make some areas pop a bit more. Alright, I've done 2 of them for you guys. I'm just gonna quietly step away from my computer. I don't want to be doing this anymore. I can't look at these BanBan characters anymore. They're just so... Okay, we're doing the bird. Opila Bird, actually probably my favourite design in the game, purely because she just looks so stupid and funny. But I decided to went a sort of ostrich route for this, because Opila Bird gives me sort of land bird vibes, those sort of flightless birds. Now, if we're thinking about the cartoon again, I think Opila is a very colourful character. She's probably the super friendly neighbour, the one who's just super peppy and happy all the time and just wants to have fun and make friends. And so I once again went a sort of wave and pose with one wing on this one. And I really wanted to exaggerate that smile on the beak. And I know beaks don't bend like that, but once again, this is a cartoon for children. You want to get that expression in there. I made her eyes big and friendly and her feathers soft and fluffy. It's unlike the actual Opila Bird, I made it so she had a difference between her feathers and the sort of bare neck and stuff. Opila Bird also gives me slight peacock vibes. Not in the way that she is a peacock, but in a way that she has these sort of long, flowing, beautiful feathers. And I exaggerated that on the wings and the tail. Other than that, everything was pretty normal. The legs were pretty more normal. I didn't go for actual ostrich feet because their feet are weird and scary and that does not fit a children's cartoon. So I went just sort of classic 3-toed bird foot. And the last minute addition was to basically take those sort of long thin feathers she has on her head and add them elsewhere, and I thought on the end of the tail would work quite well. As I was saying about peacocks, it's almost like she could flare those up if she wanted to. Would you look at that? We're once again using the thicker line art. Sometimes I feel like I'm repeating myself. Is there much more I can say? I do pretty much the same thing for this as I did the others. Lines are thick, bold and crisp. The colours are pretty much the same. I made some new tones for areas. I changed the colour purple of the wings because I didn't like the colour that was the actual wings because they're a bit too blue. But other than that, she's pretty much the same. So I'm just going to shut up and let you guys watch. Now, as funny as Opila Bird is, let's face it, she is not scary in the slightest. And so I wanted to go this really big, angry bird. Like, if this thing chases you down, you cannot outrun it. You gotta try to get to higher ground because this thing can't fly, thankfully. So I went this sort of head down, neck crooked, wings flared out, tail flared up, legs splayed apart, this really angry looking pose. Now I wanted to have her beak open screaming basically, because let's face it, in the game Opila Bird likes to scream. And I did Google references, but then I realised I had the perfect reference myself. A year or so ago my late cat Ratchet brought in this bird. The bird was fine and uninjured, I just let it recover for a bit before releasing it, but obviously I had to hold it, and I took this photo, which was quite funny because it was just screaming at me. And I thought that is actually the perfect beak angle that I want, so I used that as a reference for my beak. I wanted to go really realistic for the beak as well, because that would give it a really uncanny vibe. The idea of adding little teeth like geese have was actually suggested by my Discord server, so yeah, a little plug there, go join my Discord server, link below in the description. In terms of her head, I went more like a proper bird shape. I gave her a very angled, angry looking eye, and I made her feathers a lot more scruffy, which is a theme I kept throughout. As for her feet, I decided to reference a cassowary foot. A cassowary is another large flightless bird, and they have these huge clawed feet, and these birds are no joke. They will disembowel you if they get the chance. They're one of the most dangerous birds out there, and I thought this definitely works. Like, the death animation could be that Opila Bird runs up to you and kicks with her legs and literally just rips you open. I can imagine that's probably how she attacks. Once again, I went for thinner line art, and this definitely helped when it came to things like the beak, because I had a lot more room to add the detail in. I also found it worked really well for the feathers. Just like on Jumbo Josh, I could actually get a lot sort of texture in there and really give her this scruffy feel as compared to the fluffy feel of flowing feathers of before. Because I can imagine her feathers in this sort of physical form being quite thin and scruffy and firm, and that sort of not nice feeling. She's not very huggable, this one. Once again are just the same palette desaturated. A difference that I made from my original design of the cartoon version was I added the coloured eye in, as I felt that worked better for the physical version of her. I then went into my texturing and shading as I had before with my watercolour brush. Now, something I actually almost completely forgot to do was add in those handprints she has on her. I actually really like this idea of her design. It really gives the feel that she has actually interacted with her children as she was supposed to, and that these are just messy handprints and she hasn't been cleaned off for a while. But I decided to add a red one sort of over her face and eye. Not only does the red paint symbolise a bit of blood, but it also gives this idea that someone tried to push her back forcefully while she was possibly attacking them. The final thing I did was once again some shading layers. Shade and shine, overlay, and basically just some different tones and defined areas once again. Is that it? Are we done now, please? Oh, okay, yes, thank God. So those are my 3 redesigns for Garten of BanBan. BanBan himself, Jumbo Josh, and Opila Bird. Let me know what you think of these redesigns down below. My personal favourite of the 3 that I did is probably Opila Bird. I really like her physical form. She really is something that I can imagine running towards me through a dark hallway in a horror game, and that would genuinely be scary. Also, if you possibly want me to redesign more of the characters from BanBan, I guess I wouldn't be too averse to it if this video does well. You know, maybe, I don't know, 5,000 likes or something. That's probably reaching a bit. That's deliberate, so I'd have to do this again. But yeah, if you do really want me to redesign more characters from BanBan, I will. But anyways, guys, yeah, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, maybe subscribe, leave a like, I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!